Hi, I'm Russell Newquist.
And I'm Morgan Newquist.
We are the co-founders of Silver Empire Publishing. We're here today on our podcast where Silver Empire helps authors make money selling books. We're with Declan Finn and Adam Lane Smith, and today we're going to be talking about upping your productivity as a writer, or as some of our friends like to call it, writing at pulp speed. And I'm going to introduce these guys real quick and then let them talk about themselves. Declan is one of our authors at Silver Empire. He's written... How many books have you written now, Declan?
For Silver Empire, the number is somewhere around 15 or 17. I have written about 23 novels, 23 books total that I can think of off the top of my head. And I should not say written, I should say published. I've got a few books still on the computer that I need to edit that are not published yet. So,
all right.
Add a few more to that.
Get back to you in a second. So that's Declan Finn. He's written a bunch for us. I like to say he's written novels, so many novels that he occasionally hands me novels that he's literally forgotten that he wrote. And also with us today is Adam Lane Smith, probably best known as the author of the Burrito Avengers series. And he's written quite a few novels himself in a very short period of time. And we're going to let these guys go. Declan, why don't you introduce yourself first since you already started, and then we'll hop over to Adam.
Not much to tell. I am a full-time author. I have written the St. Tommy NYPD series, which is about a wonder-working cop versus the legions of hell, and he doesn't even have a chainsaw or a shotgun. I'm also the author of the Love at First Bite series, where I just call it Catholic Vampires and Vatican Ninjas. And I usually wind up selling a lot of people around the Throwing Stars of David. I've also written, 5 books of the Pious Trilogy. Yes, that's a joke. It's also literal. As well as multiple other thrillers that Silver Empire doesn't have yet. And a upcoming space opera series that has not yet fallen between the cracks, but don't worry, let me pump out another 4 books, and they probably will. I have been writing since I was 16, so that's a while. Yeah, that's 21 years now, and I've only been published or self-published for the last 8. So give me time. Give me another few years. I'll get up to a nice 40 books, and I'll give John Ringo a run for his money.
Great. Excellent to hear from you. Adam, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you've done?
I am Adam Lane Smith. I am a licensed psychotherapist at my day job. My night job, I'm an author. I've only written 12 books at this point. It's mostly been in the last 3-5 years. I published my first book in 2018, so I guess it's been 2 years now. Let's see, what do I write? Deus Vult Wastelanders is my biggest series. I've got 3 books published. I've got 2 more written and in the works. It's going to go on and on. It's basically, if you take Fallout and Warhammer and smash them together and then made it hyper-Catholic, that's what I would be doing there. Burrito Avenger is my other series. It's just ridiculous 80s pulp action series. Coming out with a bunch of those. And on the side, I do a lot of coaching for authors. I do a lot of nonfiction psychology books. I've got a coaching course called the Write Like a Beast course over on Gumroad. It's a couple hours of videos teaching authors how to, be more productive, I guess, like we're going to talk about tonight.
All right. So I'll kick the discussion off by saying that we definitely wanted to make sure we invited other guests on for this. Morgan's done a lot better than I have, but I've written 1 novel and 1 novella in the last 4 years. In my defense, I've picked up running a publishing company on the side, and that's soaked up a lot of my time. But we did want to pull up a couple people who have written a ton, and so I'm gonna start off the discussion. One thing that I hear a lot, people ask, well, what does it take to write a novel, and a lot of things. And I think one of the best answers I've ever heard is you write it 1 word at a time, and it's exactly that easy and exactly that hard. And I just want to kick that off for discussion, see what everybody else thinks on that, and let you guys take it from here.
Well, it does help when you actually sit down and freaking start writing. The amount of people who have said, "Oh, I have so many ideas to write a book. How do you do it?" Uh, you start writing. Have you tried writing? No. Have you tried outlining? No. Do you have a notebook that you put your ideas in? No. Then why are you talking to me? Um, these people seem to be legion. I'm quite happy that they don't write the books. It's less competition for me, but no, it's part of writing for me is just sit your ass in the chair. I don't care if it's heck, you can dictate into a microphone while you're running if that's your method. I sorry, the only type of method I prefer is the one that actually puts words on the page. Um, but no, 90% of the job is just sitting down and putting it on paper or computer or word processor or typewriter for all I care. And the amount of people who can't even put that much into it. Oh, I can't put in the time in writing. How much time do you spend on Twitter typing out tweets? It's the same bloody process, just a different user interface. And I don't know, for the amount of people who go, "Oh my God, how do you get 3,000 words a day?" I work 9 to 5. I take lunch and eat lunch at my computer. Um, and I think a large part of my process um, is one of those moments where I really wish I got the camera working so I could do the air quotes. Um, the biggest part of my process, and this might be one of my advantages, is I have a very visual imagination about what's going on in the books. So I don't have to think about wording. I just type down what I see in my head and I just put it down and keep going from there. I don't do writer's block, even when I was a quote unquote pantser. Um, now I do outlines because, you know, the Newquists would prefer that, so I do that, and I still wind up going off the rails half the time. Some of it by design, and no, writers a writer's block, as far as I'm concerned, is a block of wood that you use to bludgeon other people who try to interrupt your writing.
So one thing you mentioned a second ago that I just think is worth pointing out to people who are worried about word count for a day, if you're able to put in the full time 8 hours a day to write, like you're talking about 9 to 5, 2,000 or even 3,000 words a day. That's even at 3,000 words a day for an 8-hour day. That's less than 500 words an hour. Which is not a crazy amount. When I've been writing for myself, when I actually have time to actually sit down and write and really get focused, 500 words an hour is not that bad to be able to do. So so that kind of word count for a day is actually pretty reasonable, I would say. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, and for those people who are wondering, oh my God, how much is X words a day? Keep in mind, if you do 250 words a day, just 250 freaking words, half hour, as Russell pointed out, for at least people who are used to typing. 250 words is a page. And frankly, you do that every day for a year. Congratulations, you've got a book. You may have 2 books, depending on what format you're working on.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. Got anything to add to that, Adam?
Well, yeah, I think that one of the biggest hangups I see with people not finishing a book is not knowing the 5 steps and not trusting them. The conception phase of the book, the outlining phase of the book, the writing phase of the book, the editing phase of the book, and the proofreading. What I see is a lot of people either skipping the outlining phase, you go right to conception, from conception to writing, and they skip the outlining because they think it'll be fine. especially those when they try to do the editing and the writing phases together. You try to write, and then you go back and try to, well, I'll just edit this because it'll make the editing phase go faster. You have to completely separate those two phases. You cannot even look back on your first draft. You need to just pretend that you can't scroll back, pretend that you've forgotten how to read, and not ever read your first draft. Finish it all the way through, and that's really how you do it. There's ways to get around that, and insecurity is big, anxiety is big, trying to nitpick your own work during that first writing phase. You forget that, other artists, if you're working with clay, you just go buy some clay and then you shape it right on the potter's wheel. If you're a sculptor, you just buy a big slab of stone and start sculpting that. The authors, man, we have to make our material first. That's all the first draft is making the material and dumping it on the table. The editing phases, and I've got like 5 or 6 editing phases that each one of my books goes through. That's where you shape that clay. That's where you're carving out the stone. But that first draft, you are not going to come out with a product that is even close to a decent book. It's going to be crap. You want clay on the table. That's all that first draft is. And that's where I see most authors, when I coach authors, that's where they fall short, is that first draft. They're trying to shape it as they go. Worst idea in the world. When I got that locked in, I dialed in a couple other things. Man, I can hit 10,000 words in a day pretty easy. When I do nonfiction, I can do 2,500 words per hour. It's about 1,500 words per hour when I do fiction. But when you prep right and when you understand the process, it flows like water.
So this is kind of my own experience, and I don't have a lot of books published, but I am sitting on several. So I write fairly fast. Is that you don't necessarily have to do it with everybody, but there's something called NaNoWriMo. It's National Novel Writing Month every November. The point is to write 50,000 words in a month, which is 1,666 words a day for the whole month. And I didn't do it during November, but I just happened a long time ago to buy the No Plot, No Problem book. And then I did it on my own. And when you put that kind of limit on yourself, like you have to get this much done in this period of time, then it's much easier to stop obsessing about what goes on the page. I actually suggest that because it taught me how to write when I wasn't inspired, right? You just got to do it. And then it taught me not to worry about what was going on the page. And that's kind of really extreme end of it, but I found it to be a really, really good mental exercise to stop the obsessing over like, oh, this is crap. I hate it. It's so bad. And so sometimes I suggest that to people to get over some of the anxiety and everything with it, because you can't stop and think about it when you're not used to doing it and you have to write 50,000 words in 30 days.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought. I see a lot of people who do that multiple times. They do it every year, some authors, and that's fine. But I think that sometimes they miss what I think is the real value of the exercise, which is learning to just put words on page. And I think that's what the exercise really teaches you, if you do it right, is to ignore your inner editor and just get the words out like you've talked about. And that is a part that a lot of people have trouble with when they start, no doubt.
Oh yes, heck, my wife, who types faster than I do and does, oh yeah, I did 6,000 words before lunch. Like, when did you start? 2 hours ago. Okay, fine. And part of her problem is, again, there are times she will stop to edit in the middle of her flow, and it's like, yeah, well, that's a great way to kill your inertia and all your momentum. And yeah, then there are the days where she just spends the entire day rewriting one page repeatedly. You can't do that. It will kill you. And heck, while I will not concur with Adam about being unable to do a mostly finished product first time through, I have done it. Jaji, my editor, has come back with very few edits on some of my books. However, this is because I'm on book 23. I've been writing for 20 years, so I've got a bit of practice at it. As Orson Scott Card, the creator of Ender's Game and accompanying universe, has put it, the first 2 million words you write are practice. And he didn't mean just novels, he meant every word you write down is part of your practice. And in my case, it helped that I accidentally did a 1,200, 1,500 word space opera in 15 months once. And it's like, 12 or 15,000 word space opera. Right, 15,000 page space opera. I'm sorry. Damn it. You know, I'll get one of these numbers right eventually, but 1,500 page. That was the right number the first time. I did that in 15 months when I was in high school. So I got a lot of that practice out of the way rather early. But again, it's a matter of you have to sit down and write. And trust me, if you are a first-time writer, do one story stretched out over 4 books if you like, and then put it away for a few weeks, then come back to it, because if it's again, I'm using absurd numbers, a quartet, you go back to book 1, you're going to go, oh my god, was I high when I wrote this? And then you're going to start the rewriting process. I don't recommend doing it too often, otherwise you're just going to be stuck in a time loop and the thing will never get published no matter what system you use.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Think about it this way. You're writing this story because you're probably pumped for it. If you're pumped for it, use that hype and use that momentum. Enjoy what you're doing. That's that emotional storm over on the right side of the brain. So when you're writing, you're definitely right side of the brain for a lot of it. Left side with the linguistics, but right side is you're just pumping in when you get your flow state. You should be writing in the right side of the brain and editing on the left side of your brain with the cold, brutal logic of what was I smoking while I wrote this. If you're trying to switch back and forth between viewing your work with the different sides of the brain, man, you're going to kill that hype. You're going to kill that enjoyment. You're going to start thinking about the story just as a job you're trying to get through. And you don't want that halfway through your first draft. That's a lot of writer's block right there, is I'm just not enjoying the story anymore. Well, yeah, that's because you're sitting there and ripping it apart before you've even finished it. Now you're thinking about it coldly and logically, and that's no way to write a story. That's no way to enjoy a story. Your audience, if they see that, they're going to see that it's just cold and logical and ripped apart as you went through, and then you're going to halfway do the ending anyway. So I say go with the right brain, hype your way through the entire first draft, enjoy it, and then cringe when you do the editing, first couple of editing passes on the next one. Look at what you wrote, say, oh no, why did I do this, and then fix it then. But enjoy that first draft, really lean into it.
The only suggestion I will make in terms of editing while doing the first draft, and that's only if you have a bad habit like I used to have, where it's like, yes, I can keep going. I can keep going. It's like 36 hours later, you're still writing, and then it's like, you come back to it the next day, you have to reread the last page you wrote to make sure all the words make sense, because there have been times where it's like, yeah, it's 2 a.m. Okay, maybe I'm just going to finish this chapter. I'm just going to finish this chapter. Come back the next day. What did I think all of these words meant? So that's the only time you should try editing any part of your novel as you're writing it the first time through.
So you guys have both talked about flow in varying ways. What are your suggestions for helping authors get into the flow faster, right? Because that's when the real word counts come, is when you get your brain in the right state and you just go. But sometimes getting into that state, especially if it's not something you're doing full time where you have the time to, work yourself into it, it can be hard. So do you have any suggestions for helping people get into their flow state for writing?
Well, to some degree, I never leave it, even when I'm doing anything else, because most of my day-to-day can be summed up as things I do automatically and I don't need to think. I used to call that just commuting to work. But no, music helps. some people can play with music, some people can't. Some people need instrumental music as opposed to words with lyrics. Um, I will personally, I will use anything from Two Steps from Hell, which is a music group that largely does movie or TV trailer music, uh, almost all instrumental or choral, no words. And on the other end, I just put Sabaton in, and it's like, okay, uh, I'm doing a shootout in the Katian Forest. Okay, we're going to put on Wing to SARS, and we're just going to turn up the volume so I don't hear anything. And a large part of getting into the mind state for writing has got to be tuning out distractions from the rest of your life. If you're one of those people who constantly obsess over crap that happened over the course of the day, or crap you're anticipating over the course of the day to come, you might have other problems than trying to be a writer. But no, I definitely suggest just tune out everything else, focus on what you have in mind to do next. And I don't know, as I said earlier about my quote process, I really need a better term for that, because every time I hear somebody talk about their process, it sounds amazingly conceited. But in my process, the characters are so bloody real and lifelike to me. It's just, okay, I left the movie on pause. Now I'm going to hit play on reality again and just fall back in. Again, this is after I've been doing this for 2 decades, so I may not be the best one to ask.
So, Declan, I know you were talking earlier that you work heavily with pretty much just on the keyboard, getting words straight into a word processor. Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've seen you mention on social media that you like to dictate a lot of your work. Is that correct?
Yeah, I moved over to dictation after a long period of refusing to even try it. And once I got through a couple of books with it, man, I don't know that I can go back to just typing. I'll do it, but dictation is so much faster.
So what process do you use for that? How does that work for you?
What process? So I use Dragon Anywhere software. It's on my phone. All of us are addicted to our phones anyway, so you may as well have your phone. Dragon Anywhere, I think it costs me $15 a month. It learns your voice and your vocal patterns as you go along. So when you start out, I would do it in my car, and there'd be a lot of road noise, so I had a lot to clean up in my first book. But as the books went on, it learned my voice. I learned to speak a little louder, enunciate a little better. There's very little cleanup on those books now at all. I think I've written 5 or 6 books through dictation at this point. It took a little bit to get used to. I know that my personal editor, when I dictated my first book, edited it up and sent it to him, despised it, told me that I should never use it again. It was terrible because my writing quality went backward. I was thinking so hard about the process of dictating that my quality decreased. It plummeted drastically. As I went on, another 2 or 3 books, each book it got progressively better until it caught up. Second or third book caught up with my typing writing ability, and that at that point they were matched. So they've been solid ever since. So now my writing quality is matched whether I'm dictating or typing. It was a process of learning. It's much like if you've used Siri on your phone or whatever the Android equivalent is. There is a learning curve on it. You know, you have to learn to enunciate the punctuation, enunciate the breaks in between. But honestly, I mean, you can type. I can type a little over 100 words a minute. I worked at a call center for relay communication for the deaf, so I had to type and speak at the same time, listen to conversations. So typing is not a problem, but 100 words a minute, I'm on the higher end of most people. Dictation can be anywhere from 125 to 160 words per minute for most people. And most of us, when we get used to it, we can speak. So I dictated about this speed right now. I don't dictate at this speed anymore. It's just natural flow of conversation. And once you get used to creating that flow, right? I teach creating a mind flow state. I teach that professionally. So once you get into that with a dictation and you've dictated a book or two, it is easy as pie. It's getting through that initial learning phase. It's a really hard part that discourages a lot of people who do the 1 week free trial and say this is terrible, and they never go back to it. If you stick with it, oh, it's a productivity boost, big time.
Do you use so I've tried dragon dictation myself in the car, and I've had a little bit of trouble with road noise and everything. Do you use a microphone or an external microphone or anything with it, or do you just use your phone straight up?
Not my phone, my car. So my car has a built-in Bluetooth phone, so it
Okay.
picks it up that way. Yeah, I don't hold my phone and dictate like this because that probably would be terrible. But my car, the speaker is already designed to kind of block out road noise anyway, so that's
Right.
been really crucial. So if you got a built-in speaker and your built-in phone set up in your car, it's a lot better. That, like I said, the road noise initially was terrible. The road noise actually has gotten a lot better, even as the weather has got worse and there's louder road noise. It's picked up on my voice, and I enunciate better and I speak a little bit louder. So it's got drastically better as time has gone on.
I know Kevin J. Anderson, probably one of the most prolific writers there's been. I know he pretty much exclusively dictates his work now, and he's rich enough he has somebody type it up for him afterwards. But I know he does that, and one of the anecdotes I've heard him talk about is that he uses that to get in writing almost any time, almost wherever he is. What kinds of situations do you find yourself in where most people would have a hard time writing, but because you're dictating, you find that you can get in 10 or 15 minutes of writing or whatever?
So like I said, we're all addicted to our phones. We have them in our face 24/7. So I use that. I used to, all right, I'm a therapist. I have a clinic I go to, and I bought a little, $200-300 notebook computer, little tiny thing. I'd take it to work. I charge it up. I take it and say, okay, I'm gonna have 1 hour lunch break. I'm gonna take it. I'll put it on my desk, and I'll do it at work. And I will totally write at work. And I would pull it out. I'd wait for it to boot up, and I'd load up my word processor. Then I'd kind of sit there and think, and then I'd type, and then I'd say, oh no, it's coming up, and I've only got 15 minutes left. But what if it's trying to update? What if it doesn't shut down? So then I'd shut it down early, and then I'd be sitting there twiddling my thumbs. So I'd maybe get half an hour in, with a phone. You get 15 minutes, you pull it out, you open the app, it's already loaded on the last thing you hit the button, and you just start dictating like this. So if I get 15 minutes, I can do 14 minutes of that, of just pure dictation. And again, at 160 words per minute, that's an awful lot of dictation. Maybe I slow down to 100 words a minute. So at 14, that's 1,400. That could be 1,400 words that you knock out in a 14-minute phase. That's pretty solid to be able to do that. So like I said, when I'm dictating nonfiction books, when I'm dictating my psychology books, when I'm dictating my writing books, 2,500 words an hour. I just knock them out really fast. 4 hours, it's 10,000 words that I can knock out. I can knock out a 60,000 word novel in about 8 days. If I just, not even completely, but I mean, even during a work day, if I give me 8 days where I'm really dedicated to it, I can knock it out in about 8 days. Dictation has changed the game for me because it's so incredibly simple. And Dragon Anywhere, it's right there, and it's all text, so it's already written in text form. I just take it, I copy it, I put it in Google Docs, and then I've got it synced up to any computer I want. I take that and I copy and paste that into Word. I just reformat it real quick, and then the book is written. I've spoken my book, and I don't have to dictate it and then go listen to it and type it up. It's done. It's so easy. And then I've got Evernote on there that has all my notes for upcoming scenes. So my outlines, I got my next 5 scenes for my outlines in here. And if I got 3 minutes instead of 15, I probably don't want to write for 3 minutes, but I can pull out my Evernote and I can scan the next 2 or 3 scenes that I've got coming up. I can play them in my head. I kind of think about them, think of like, what would it be a cool thing that character would say in response to this activity happening. I can play the little scenes in my head constantly. I can just constantly be looking at my outline on my phone anytime I have spare minutes. If I'm eating a sandwich, I pull it out and I look at my 3 upcoming scenes, and I just run them in my head. So then when it's time to whip out the phone and dictate, I've already been running the scenes in my head all day, so they're constantly there.
So I'm gonna fire next question over to Declan because you've partially answered this, Adam, already with the last question. But and Declan, I know nowadays you basically are doing this more or less full time. But back in the day when you weren't full time and you had other things going on, what what tricks did you use to get writing time in the midst of a busy schedule?
Usually just pen and paper on subway and buses, as I live in New York. Uh, it's amazing how much you can get done when you've got an hour and a half on the bus and subway going into work and going out of work. Um, the last job, for example, was as, quote, contract writer for New York University, Polytech Engineering School. I, I was the creative end and the proofwriting end because guys with engineering degrees apparently don't know how to use English sometimes. And
I work in a technical field. I can confirm that.
okay then. But yeah, all it is was pen and paper. Heck, sometimes I still do pen and paper because it, while dictating is useful, you can't usually start dictating whole novels while other people are talking around you. Thankfully, I have the advantage of people talk around me, and I just scribble in my book, and people are so wrapped up in what they're talking about. Oh, look, that they don't even notice that I'm not paying attention. It's amazing how constant that is over the last 2 decades, but nowadays we just have to go to social media to be ignored while other people talk. Um, I'm old-fashioned. I prefer to be ignored in person. And yeah, again, pen, paper will do it. And frankly, a lot of that is useful when technically you you're kind of editing as you're transcribing what you write down on the notebook as you're typing it into the computer, when it's like, all right, for handwriting aside, what the hell was I trying to say here? uh, okay, I can read these words. I'm not sure they made sense as in the particular order I put them in. Sometimes that happens even when everything is dead silent, but so yeah, that's how I keep some of the productivity up. And technology is wonderful. I can just put in drafts for Gmail, or I can copy and paste later on when I'm on my phone. I don't usually need to do that too often, but usually I don't even bother trying to dictate while driving because I can be only so distracted. So music is a good distraction where I don't have to focus too much on the road. Trying to, do the full audio visual, I see what I'm writing, doesn't work very well when I'm also driving a 1-ton vehicle on the road in New York traffic.
So I was thinking about this while you were talking, though, and you personally have the advantage, at least in this regard, of living in New York City, where there is an awful lot of public transit. And I know for myself, commute time eats up a lot. We were discussing this before we started recording, that we're all, for those who are watching this air a few weeks from now, we're all coming to you from under coronavirus quarantine, more or less at the moment. And that's given me the fact that I'm working at home now all the time, and I've gained 5 hours a week just from not being in the car that I have back from that I'm making use of. And I think my situation is actually not all that bad. I think there are a lot of people out there who have way worse commutes. And if you're on public transit, that's nice. But if you're not on public transit, I actually think that's one time when Adam's method of dictation is really going to be a major win for a lot of people. If you're on the if you're driving by yourself, that's a really good spot. There's nobody else to talk to anyway. There's nothing else to do. Great time to get some work done. I personally look forward to the era of self-driving cars so that I can just, actually get something productive done with that time. But
So we've talked a lot about outlining, and that to be productive, you have to have an outline to know what you're doing, which cuts down on the amount of time you spend staring at your screen going, okay, what's next? What methods do you guys use to outline? Do you have any specific suggestions for outlining? I know Russell and I have a couple that we use, but we'll let you guys talk about what you do first, and then we can talk about ours.
Adam, you want to go, or should I just start talking?
I was going to let you go, but you know what? No, I'm going to go first.
Okay.
So I break mine down real easy. I do Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. I just write just paragraph on each one, what's going to have to happen in each one, right? Act 1, introduce the characters, introduce the setting, get things set up, get the conflict set up, introduce the villain, blah, blah, blah. What's going to have to happen in each act. Once I've got that, I open up a table in Word document, 3 columns, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. I put location, I put cast, and I put action. And I just copy and paste those, 10, 20 times or whatever into each thing. And then I start filling them in. Where the location of the scene is, what the cast is, maybe in parentheses, what their specific goal in the scene is, and then I do action. And I just write what's going to happen, just like a second grader telling a story. Just what happens, boom, 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 bullet point of the action kind of thing. And then tie it in with the goals, right? Beginning of the scene, end of the scene, and then just start filling in the story beats in between of what leads from the beginning to the end. That's my outlining. It's short, it's punchy, it's broken up into 3 different columns. And then as I go and I do the story, I go back and I take each one and I just color them red so that I know that's done. So whenever I come back to my outline, I can see immediately right where my next one is.
And do you just decide how many scenes you need by what is happening when you figure out what needs to happen in the act, or do you have a certain number of scenes you try to fill?
No, I just go until I figure, a couple of combat scenes, a couple of social scenes. Yeah, that looks about right. I kind of fly by the seat of my pants on that one, I guess. A little bit more like a hippie, I guess, there. No, but, as you go on, you get a pretty good idea of which scenes, as you guys know, of how much is going to flesh out an act. You get that feeling. I kind of eyeball it and figure, well, fighting scene, I'm pretty heavy into those. So if I throw a couple of those into each act, that'll definitely flesh out my book. I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe Declan can help you on that one a little more than I can.
That was actually one of the things I'll comment. The very first novel that I wrote, one of the most difficult parts when I was outlining it was trying to figure out how much content do I actually need for a novel length work, because I'd written short stories before, so I had a good idea for those. But for a novel, it was really weird. We'll do a whole episode on this topic later, but for me, that first time through was my outlines. I simultaneously had too much and too little. Like, I didn't have enough structure in some ways, but then I had certain areas where I had way too much in there. And because I just didn't really know how that was going to translate to a finished product. Once you've done your first novel, it's much easier. You kind of have a sense of, okay, this is about how much I need. It needs to be about there.
Yeah, my first book is 100,000 words, so it's not a short book. And then I ended up, there are at least 2 or 3 whole, they weren't even really subplots, just things that I ended up throwing out from the outline. So I'm like, this is long enough. This is enough. I don't need this.
Declan, how about you? What do you find helpful on your outlining process?
Well, most of what I do, I don't do acts. I just do chapter by chapter. And I believe very much in a serialized format along the lines of let's go old school. And, the original Flash Gordon serials, for example, where you've got 15 minutes of story followed by cliffhanger. And the cliffhanger keeps the audience coming back. In my case, it's how can I end each chapter on some kind of cliffhanger, whether it's, an actual physical threat or just a oh crap moment. And I do not mean the type of pseudo cliffhangers you got with my arch enemy, the schmuck who shall not be named, where he ends, for example, one chapter with, and a shadow comes over our protagonist. The next chapter starts, and it's, the waiter with his tea or something else like that. It's like, wow, that is the cheapest maneuver I have ever seen. But I try to pace each chapter where it's got enough content for about 2,500 words, and it has to have some kind of lingering threat or question at the end. It doesn't have to be, what was it? Mickey Spillane's guy comes through the door with a machine gun to keep the plot going, but you have to have some kind of question or threat to make the reader go to the next chapter and keep going. Let's face it, we all read books here. How many of us just go, oh, just one more chapter, and then it's 5 a.m, and there goes your sleep for the evening. That's pretty much what I shoot for, and my most cherished reviews are the ones that go, yeah, I was just going to read a few chapters, then I fell asleep with the book on my face because I just couldn't stop. So again, I try to pace out in my outlining, chapter by chapter beats. I try to have a shootout, a fist fight, an explosion at least once every chapter or two. Sometimes they get away from me and they go on for a few chapters, but that's neither here nor there. But once you get again, as Morgan put it, once you get the first book out of the way, you have a better feel for this sort of thing. Heck, my first St. Tommy novel, Hellspawn, I was going to have an entire chapter dedicated to just plain investigative legwork, going from building A to building B and running into a lot of dead ends. And I got to the point in the book where the outline said I should be doing this, and it went, you know what? I'm bored. I'm considering all the stuff I just did. I did spiritual harm to my protagonist, and you have to read the books in order to get that one. I would just, I just stuck him in a church so he could pray for a page or two, and he reflected on everything that just happened and what he should be doing, and a little bit of angst. No, not angst, conflict, internal conflict. And then I blew up his car with a car bomb so we could get the plot going. And, again, there are times I will do that, especially with Hellspawn, because Hellspawn was the first novel I really did an outline for. And I went through it, and after a while, I was like, I'm bored. I'm going to throw in a gunfight here. And it worked. I got some flack not for going off script. I did not get flack for excessive violence. I actually got flack for who I decided my random encounter villain was going to be. But that was about it. But again, you have to get practice. You have to put in the work, and you have to get a feel for what you're doing and how you operate, because everybody operates differently. I don't know anyone else who functions as I do. Heck, I read in a recent interview with Sapkowski. I cannot say his first name, Andre maybe, the guy who wrote the Witcher novels, where he said, I don't actually see what the action as I'm writing. I just see words, so I just write those down. I don't understand people like that, but it's like, hey, you're the one with the Netflix series and the video games. I'll take your word for it.
So this is weird because I'm actually a videographer too, but I actually don't see scenes. I see words. I
was going to riff off of Declan here for a second, but also harken back to something Adam said. It's kind of an odd situation because I very, very much see it like Declan describes. But at the same time, with Adam's comment earlier about the left brain, right brain, I come from a very technical background, a software engineer for decades. And so when I construct writing, it is definitely a creative process, artistic side of your mind a little bit, but my entire approach to it is actually it's almost like I'm engineering the story rather than just constructing one or writing. And so I kind of come at it in a really different way. And I've tried doing it the other ways, and it just doesn't work for my brain. But I do very much see, same time, I very, very much see the pictures in my head and see the images of what's happening. So I get where Declan's coming from. I liked what you were talking about with the cliffhangers at the end of every chapter, and I actually use a very specific technique when I write on that. It's very easy and very effective, which is that I try to end each chapter with anywhere from a couple sentences to a paragraph, no more than that. That's basically what might logically be considered the beginning of the next chapter. But kind of halfway. Like, I like to leave it just vague enough that you really don't know what's happening, but enough that it kind of hints about what's coming in the next chapter. And that has been extremely effective for me in getting a chapter out there that the people get to the end of it and really want to pick up the next one.
He also writes really short chapters. He had like a whole chart, and he's like, each chapter has to be 1,500 words.
I engineer a story, really do. But that's what works for me. That approach works for me as we go.
Yeah, I'll take this interlude to, I don't know, give a disclaimer or whatever. So what we're suggesting here is not necessarily what you should be like, this is the way, and go and do it that way. It's like, these are suggestions for what might work for you. And in the end, you just have to go and try it yourself. You have to figure out what really works for you, what works for your process. And you can't totally copy what other people are doing, but you can kind of take suggestions from them or new ideas to try or anything like that. And that's part of the point of this. Did you want to talk about the outline, please?
For my outlining, and I guess Morgan does this too.
I do, actually.
Now. I borrowed the framework. It's actually a book that was targeted to script writers, so I had to do a little bit of fudging with it because some of the specifics in it don't really work on a novel. Where he's talking about page counts and all of that. The page counts of a screenplay are radically different than the page counts of a novel. But I know some people who don't like this book very much. So again, this is kind of a what works for you and what doesn't. I'm a big fan of the method outlined in the book Save the Cat. It outlines a process for basically a skeleton of a story to hang different story parts on and to get a framework to work around. As somebody who approaches a story very much from an engineering standpoint, that really works for my brain. And I know a lot of other people, I've mentioned it to, have had good results with it. But I also know some people who are really not fond of it.
Maybe we can post your alterations, because you changed it. It's changed it into 4 acts, and you did like a little fudging.
I tweaked it a little bit. It's not so much of a change as what I've done, as I've just reworded some of what he was doing in ways that kind of fit with me. And I did actually, put some stuff together to kind of take his points for. He has stuff in his outline like around this page in your script, this kind of thing should happen, and I had to do some math to rework that to novel page length, and we can repost that and share it too to help convert that for novelists. But that has worked really well for me. Also very fond of the Lester Dent master plot formula. For that one is targeted at short stories, but the concepts in it, you can actually apply that to a novel length work as well. And I have a friend who uses that, who writes chapters of the Lester Dent plot formula is based around a 6,000 word short story. And Hans Schantz, one of our friends, he writes his chapters. Each chapter he writes to the lesser than plot formula, and then collects that many together to make his novel, and that's worked very well for him. So just a couple things that we've used for the outlining process that have really, really helped.
I do not have an engineering brain. I like the Saber Cat one because it lays it out with what type of event I need to have happen next. So it makes it easier for me to figure out, easier to direct, I guess, the creative side of my brain to, okay, what kind of thing needs to happen here, and I can figure it out. Whereas without it, it's like, well, I could have all these things happen here, but on this one, it's like, okay, this is one of the points is the dark night of the soul, where everything is just super terrible, and it looks like you might not be successful in that kind of. So like, I know, okay, dark night of the soul, this is the kind of thing I have to start thinking about, and that's really helpful for me.
All of that was helpful for me too. So so we've had good luck with those. So how well do y'all stick to your outlines when you're writing?
I more or less use everything in the outline. Again, Hellspawn was an outlier in that there was a bit I took from Hellspawn and I wound up putting in book 2, Death Cult, and it worked fine there. And I wasn't bored enough with Death Cult that it's like, okay, I need to shoot out every few pages, otherwise I just wander off. But no, for the most part, I will stick to the outline. There are days where the material I have outlined doesn't fit in the amount of chapters I have outlined for it. So that's just a matter of changing the numbering on chapters, really. That's actually a problem I'm currently having with St. Tommy, Book 9, Destiny, which is, well, part of it is changed because the events of the book take place in Rome. I had to fit in some experiences I had in Rome into the book because I desperately needed to hurt large parts of the Italian populace. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's a long story that we can fit in some other time. But aside from that, it's just a matter of changing the chapter numbers. But yeah, more or less, I stick to the outline as is. Sometimes there will be more gunshots, and sometimes there are occasions where I have looked at the outline and goes, you know what? I'm tired of actually writing shootouts. Let's just move the plot along already.
I don't believe you.
That was one of the worst things I've ever heard a human say.
How about you, Adam? How well do you stick to your outlines?
No, yeah, outlines are not sacred. It's a living document. Before I add something, I make sure it's actually going to make sense. I don't just start throwing everything in and just say, hey, that sounds fun. But no, I add to it all the time. That's the one thing that I will go back and change and edit as I go through the book. Sometimes I'll even add pieces to a completed read scene in my outline. And that tells me, I need to go back and write that again. It happens, you get cool, brilliant inspiration while you're halfway through one scene and you got to do a separate sequel scene that follows it up. It's not a big deal to do that. The outline, though, is so crucial to have a roadmap of beginning and end so that you actually know, and then how you're supposed to get there. It makes it so much easier to flow as you go through it. But yeah, I change the outline all the time as I go through those books.
Now I'm thinking we should have found somebody that's a pantser to have on this show. Like, how are you highly productive without an outline? But
well, if you want me to harken back to my days of writing all the other books, I can just tell you I had a lot of it in my head already. It's just a matter of, okay, well, I want this action scene over here. I want this action scene over here. I just need to connect the two. Because even as a pantser, I always knew where the heck I was going. I just didn't have it written down in nice, neat chapter outlines.
I'm absolute murder on my outlines. They actually end up bearing very little resemblance to the finished book.
I'm pretty close.
And that's why your marriage works.
So, why don't we just take a minute and instead of going directed, you guys, what do you want to share with people that we maybe haven't covered already that would increase their productivity?
Declan, you want to go, or do you want to take a second?
I've actually said everything I wanted to, especially, look, I came in with one very simple piece of advice for everybody who, you know what, let's make a distinction. If you want to write a book, please don't. For one very simple reason, it's not as much fun as you think it. Okay, it's fun writing the book. There's still a business end that you are not going to enjoy that much. So if you want to write a book, I do not recommend it. For those who have to write, for those who, it's too late for you, you're already addicted, you're one of these people who keeps a notebook by the bed because you have just one more thing you have to remember to put down into the story idea. Or you're one of those people who you're struck by something in the news and you have to write it down so you can put it into the manuscript. Okay, for those people who have to write, for the love of God, just start writing already. Just, do not come up to a writer and say, "Oh, I have to write a book. I'm compelled to write a book." Well, if that's true, you should bloody well start freaking writing already. Not that I've heard this question too often. I really have. But if you have to write, just write. And if you want to write, turn back now while you still can. Adam?
I mean, he's definitely got a point. It's the business aspect of it. It's not all fun. It can be sort of fun. There is so much work involved. You have to love storytelling. It has to be in your blood. It has to be in your brain. You have to be unable to escape it if you really want to thrive at it. You know what I would say more than anything is understand that writing is a craft. It's a skill. I don't want to say an art, but if you don't pick up a brush and become a master painter on your very first painting, you don't sculpt something and it's the most beautiful piece of art anyone has ever seen. You learn. There is a steep learning curve. Understand that when you start writing, you will be terrible, more likely. I hate to be the guy that says it, but if you have a literature degree, you might even be worse than most people, because now you have other people's idea of what should be good instead of your own just love of it. You're not going into it with a passion. You're going into it with a million voices screaming in your ear about what you should and shouldn't do. Man, understand that you're going to be bad. You're going to be really bad. You hire a smart editor who's better than you, and they progressively teach you as you go along how to do better and better and better. Your first book does not have to be perfect. It will not. My first book is far from perfect. I've heard it's good. Cool. It is so far from perfect. But what really kicked me over into publishing it was I read the worst book I have ever read in my entire life. I actually pre-ordered it in hardback, thinking it would be great. Gave me multiple migraines as I was reading through it. And by the time I finished it, I looked at the book and said, I can never, ever, ever feel bad about anything I've written ever again. And I keep that book on my bookshelf prominently. It's the worst book I've ever read, and I glare at it whenever I see it. It makes me feel almost sick to my stomach. And that reminds me that good enough is good enough, and that I'm progressively getting better, and at least I'm better than that book. It really is, man. It's a craft, and you have to be prepared to get better at it and to suck and to learn and to humble yourself and to feel bad about yourself and find mentors. You have to. If you come into this expecting perfection, you will fail. If you come into this pursuing perfection, cool. You should pursue perfection relentlessly, because you're going to get better and better. You will eventually paint your masterpiece. Don't come into this expecting that you're going to be a good writer. Just don't. Don't put that on yourself.
All right. Well, I think we're at a good spot to start wrapping it up. So I'm going to let Declan go first again, so that Adam can finish us off, since we did this the other way around. Tell us again who you are, Declan, and what you've done, and where people can find your books and what they might like.
Well, you can find most of my books on silverempire.org. The rest of my books, the books that are not there are on Amazon. Declan Finn is fairly easy to find. I will usually recommend my Love at First Bite series, which is heavily character driven, and then there are explosions. Or if you just prefer the explosions and punching demons in the face, there's my St. Tommy NYPD series. Both of those are found at the Silver Empire site. If you just want a straight up thriller with no fantasy elements whatsoever, yeah, you're going to have to either do the Pious Trilogy on silverempire.org or go for some of my other non-Silver Empire works over on Amazon. Do not read the murder mysteries unless you are heavily into science fiction conventions and you have a warped sense of humor. If you do prefer cons and have a warped sense of humor, then It Was Only on Stun and Set to Kill will be recommended. Yeah, that's about it.
All right. And Adam. Adam?
I was just thinking, who am I? Man of mystery. No, my name is Adam Lane Smith. So if you put me on Google, do not type Adam Smith. You'll see this old dead guy. Thousands of books written about this old dead guy, an economist. Adam Lane Smith, you will find me on Amazon. What I'm best known for, a lot of my psychology books are over on there. All my teachings about, like I said, I've done a lot of coaching. I've done therapy. So I end up coaching a lot of first-time authors. I've got a Gumroad course called Write Like a Beast Deluxe course. It's usually $97. I've got a deal running. You know what? I'll do a deal for this. I'll do a code up for this after this. 60% off. It's like $38 or something. It's a couple hours of video courses. If you use code Silver Empire, you can take 60% off. If you're looking for a way to start really overclocking your productivity, that'd be a good place to start. Other than that, I'm writing Burrito Avenger right now. I'm writing some ultra Catholic fiction. Russell, you got me really started on that. Declan, you really hammered that. You two guys right there are to blame for me getting into Catholic fiction in the first place. Because it's between the two of you with the gunfights and explosions and the sheer awesome melt your face off. Man, I just can't get enough of that. So I figured I better write my own.
All right. Very good. And we're Russell and Morgan Newquist from Silver Empire. You can find our Facebook group for more author help at Silver Empire Helps Authors Make Money Selling Books, titled exactly the same as our podcast. Come over and join us. Do answer the questions when you join the group, because if you don't answer the questions, I'm not letting you in. It's an author group only. They don't have to be great answers, but we only let authors into the group. It's a private group, so you can talk about authory stuff without worrying about your fans getting upset when you're talking about the business side. And we'd love to have everybody come join us.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week with another episode.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Declan. Glad to have you guys with us.
Anytime.
Glad to be here. Thank you.